What up guys, this is Eddie James from minimaliso.com. We're just going to do a retouch video today of a cityscape type shot. Include some of the techniques you would use for this, not all. It's videos sort of aimed at beginners, so I'll try and use the easiest techniques. First up, we've got a bracket of 7 shots here. And we're going to turn this into a HDR file, and that will contain all the data from all these shots. Then over here, I've got 6 15-second shots, and we're going to use this to create a 90-second exposure of the water. Now, the first thing I want to do is grab all of these brackets, right-click, photo merge, HDR. Okay, we've got a preview here. Now we want auto align ticked on, auto tone ticked off. Lightroom deghosting is terrible. If you need to do deghosting, you're much better off doing it in Photoshop. So I'm just going to leave this on none and hit merge. Okay, it's created this HDR file which contains all the data from these. Now, that means we can basically boost the exposure and lower the exposure, and if you raise it, it won't have any noise. If you lower it, it'll pull back details in the highlights if you need them. First thing I want to do is I want to punch this white balance over to fairly blue, because it was blue hour. I'm not looking for it to be super accurate. It's just the creative choice around about here for me. A little bit of global contrast. I like to add on this sort of shot just a small amount of clarity. It can help with the perception of sharpness. I think this exposure needs raising. We want to get detail here. I'll pull these highlights down, and that will pull back detail in all the bright areas. You don't always want to do it to 100. It's just you test the image out yourself. And I want to pull a bit of detail out in the shadows. We want to get all the detail we can in the raw file, not later when we're working in pixels in Photoshop. I want to add a little bit more sharpening to the initial raw file, and I want it to be 0.8 to mitigate halos. If you hold Alt on the mask, it shows you where it's masking. White reveals, black conceals. Probably want it on about. There we go. Don't want the sky sharpened. And because I shot it at ISO 400 because I saw some trees and I wanted them frozen, and I wanted the shutter speed up a little bit. So I was at 18 millimeters. So at f8, from I think about a meter, the whole thing is sharp, and I got to 1/30th, which, unless there's some violent wind, should be enough to freeze the trees. But because I'm at ISO 400, I just want to add a touch of noise reduction. Always put about 50 color noise reduction. If it won't do anything unless there's color noise, and then it will remove it. We want these two ticked on. Make sure it's on your lens. And I'm not going to straighten just now. I'm going to do that later after I've merged the water in. And for the raw adjustments, that's probably about it for now. Maybe I could pull these whites back a little bit. Okay. All right. Right click, edit. Now, if I wanted to send it as a raw file, I'd open it as a smart object. But I've done my raw adjustments, so I basically want to just edit it in Photoshop. Okay, here it is. Now, first thing I want to do is, it's just sort of an easy way to dodge and burn. It's a good way for beginners to start grasping the concept. I'm going to just Control J to make a duplicate. I'm going to turn this into a right click and turn it into a smart object. And all that means is if we make an adjustment with anything in the filter section, we can come back to it and redo it. It's not set in stone. Okay, now we can go filter, camera raw. Alright, now when you dodge and burn, the burn darkens everything, and well, burning is darkening and dodging is lightening things up. So what I'm going to do is put this on -2, and that essentially is going to burn the whole image. And then with these radial filters, I'm going to use them to put light back in. I'm going to put that back on. I'm going to put this on 3. Whoops. And I just pulled have the highlights down a little bit just to protect them when you're boosting the exposure here. Now I made my initial radial filter. If I hold Control and Alt and grab it, whoops. What the hell's happened there? All right, sorry. Start again. I think my mouse button was playing up on me. All right, now here's my first one. Control Alt, grab it, and it's created a new one that's exactly the same. So I can keep pulling them over. And you can see it starts to create some light gradients and makes the lighting a little bit more dynamic. And this trick sort of works. It works better on other images than others. This is probably not the best one for it. I think it works really good when I'm in an area with like close up to sort of a lot of shop lighting. But I want you to learn this technique, so because it's good for beginners to start learning how to dodge and burn. That one I might just turn down. Okay. I'm going to hit OK. Now, it's obviously overdone, but we have an opacity slider. And we can just wind it back to where we want it. It'll push light where you want it. I mean, I could raise the exposure a little bit now because it's darkened things down. We can put them in a group, select them both. You can just select one, hold shift. If there's a whole row of them, you can select them all, or you can just hold control and click on each one. And then control G, and we'll call this radial D and B, dodge and burn. You can see it's just sort of punched light where we want it, and made a few little gradients. The next thing I want to do is a sky change, and I have this sky over here. Just going to drop it in. All right. Now, it's probably not the best technique for this image, but I want to show you how to do the blend if, because it's probably the easiest way to do a sky change, and often it's the quickest. At the end towards the end of the row here, just double click, brings up the layer style box, and we want under this blending options, we've got blend if. It's on grey, we want to put it on blue. So the sky's blue. And we move this slider over. And then we hold Alt and grab it, and you can see it splits. And we that sort of puts a gradient. And hit OK. We can always come back to this and readjust it. Now I want to grab this sky and push it up. Okay, now it hasn't done a perfect job. It's gone over areas. It goes over all the signs, and it's here, and all we got to do is put a mask on. So we just hit this mask button, And it's just probably going to take about 5 minutes of basically masking it out where we don't want it. Don't want it here. You just got to zoom in. Now, I would probably want a little bit of it on this area. Make my brush a bit harder so it doesn't go over edges, and I'll put this on, say, 33%, and we can begin to take it out but leave some behind. And it's going to leave a bit of the color on. Now, some areas you don't want the color at all. Definitely don't want it on the AMP sign. So we just want to mask it off. And, you just got to spend 5 minutes going over it and cleaning up where you don't want the color. It's pretty easy for a beginner to grasp this. It's a little bit of a pain having to do this, but it depends on the image. Some images it'll happen more than others. I like a little bit of it on the window there. Don't want it on there. Don't want in here. Put my opacity up. Probably don't want it there. No, that's just the natural color that came through for whatever reason. Make sure it's not on any of this stuff. Okay, now we've got the Rialto here. I definitely want some of it coming onto the Rialto. I like it there. I'm gonna make sure it's reasonably hard. Whoops. I'm doing this quick and nasty for the tutorial. When you do it, take your time. It's up to 100. And we want to get this back. Oops. I'm not going to worry about this. What I should probably do is just clone it out. But I'm going to be quick for this tutorial because it's going to go for a long while. Oops. Just make sure that's all back. I don't want to take it all out. I want to take most of it out. Because I do want some of that color to come over it. Now I could see this layer style. Um, I could tell it if to just affect the color, or I could tell it to just affect the luminosity. You get different effects. Sometimes, if there's a clear sky, I like to put dark clouds in, and I just put a picture of clouds over it, and then just put it on luminosity. Uh, you can play around with the different layer styles. You'll get different effects. Uh, Hard light seems to punch through there quite well. Yeah, put it on hard light. Um, it's just a matter of experimenting. Okay, everything's there. Now I'll put this in a group, and I'll call it sky change. Now, one thing you could do is you could play around with the colors here. Like this is like a magenta. Um, you could just select this color sort of area and just select, put it on color range, and grab your little plus thing and just sort of click around and play with the range, and just try and get that area sort of selected. Hit OK, and that's going to make a selection, and then you could just hit a curves or a selective color. I'll just grab a curves for now, and you could play around with it. You could push red into that, you could take it out. um, if you could push yellow into it, make it more orange. And I'm not going to totally adjust the color now. Just showing you how you can play around with it. I'll get rid of that curves for now and leave it as it is. But yeah, if you wanted to, play around with certain colors, that's sort of how you go about it. The next thing I want to do is put the water in. Um, I've got a picture of water. No, sorry, Lightroom. I have to do this. Okay, now I just want to select them all and be on that one, and then select them all. I want to put the white balance to the same value. Same sort of minor adjustments. I probably want to pull detail out, show the water a bit more, about there. Just punch in the same sort of settings you had. And tick these on. Okay, and now I'm going to hit the sync button, and make sure they're all ticked, check all, and hit synchronize, and it's going to push this across them all. And now we want to open these as layers in Photoshop. So I'm going to right click, edit in, open as layers. Okay, it's loaded them all. We basically want to select them all. I can either hold control and click them all, or I can have one end selected, hold shift, click the other, it grabs them all. Now, first thing we want to do is align them to make sure they're all perfectly aligned. So have them all selected, edit, auto align layers, leave it on auto, does a pretty damn good job by itself. Okay, they're aligned. Now I just want to turn these into a stack. So with them all selected, right click, convert to smart object. Okay, it's made a stack. Now all we have to do is go to layer, smart objects, and stack mode, and we'll put it on mean. And this is basically going to simulate, it's going to use the 6 15-second shots to simulate a 90-second exposure. Okay, you can see the water's gone all smooth. Now I just want to hit Control A to select all, hit Control C to copy, hit Control V over here, and it's dropped in. Now, as you can see, if I turn this on and off, it's moved a little bit. It's moving. They're not perfectly aligned. So basically, I just want to have all this stuff selected. Hit Edit and Auto Align Layers. Okay. Now when I turn this on and off, you can see they don't move. They're perfectly aligned. The one thing I've noticed is for some reason it turns off uh, this radial DMB. So I just want to go back into it again and just hit OK. And you can see this will go dark again. Bang, it turns it back on. I don't know why it does that, but it's a little Photoshop glitch. Yay. Now, we basically just want to put a mask on this and just paint it in where we want it. I want a black mask on it. Now, I could either hit the mask button and then hit Control I and that inverts and just flips the mask. Or if I just hit this button, it gives me a white mask. If I hold Alt and hit it, it gives me a black mask just from the get-go. Now, what I want to do is basically paint white on the water area. Now, I shot this at the long water shots at f/18 now, and the rest of the image was shot at f/8. And f/8 is always going to be sharper, especially on any kind of zoom lens, than f/18. Now, if I was not doing this for a tutorial, if I was doing it for me, I'd get a lot closer to the edges. I'd zoom in and not run over them. But just for this tutorial, I'm just going to do it really quickly. And boom, we've masked the water in. Because it's at f/18, when I get closer if I go over the edges, it just softens them a little bit. Because f/18 is not as sharp. So that's what I said. I'd get closer and I'd zoom in and do it. Now, I'm just going to hit Control G, put it in a group, and call it water. Now, this little street light is annoying me. It should have been on, but it was off. So I'm basically just going to turn it on. I'm going to create a new layer. Zoom right into it. And I'm basically just going to paint white into it. Probably get that a little bit more perfect, but it looks real enough. Now, Glenn Dewis is a Photoshop trainer that I've often looked at, and one of his sayings is "sell the fake." If somebody just looks at it and they can't tell, then you've done your job. Even with like the blend if, like it's not 100% perfect, it's pretty close to it, but no one would pick it unless they're a Photoshop expert. So, there's no such thing as a perfect selection. You just got to get as close as possible so people can't tell. Now, I'm just going to pop this into a group and call it Street Light. Okay, what else do I want to do to this image? I've got to get rid of this thing down here. I'm going to crop this off, and so it's probably not necessary for me to do it now, but I'll just show you. I I could make a stamp of this and use content aware fill, but I think just cloning this will do just fine. So I've just opened a new layer. I'm going to hit the clone brush. Make sure it's on current and below. If it's on current layer, it will only select what's on that layer, and that's nothing. If it's on current and below or all layers, it's pretty much going to select every layer. And I'm just going to hold Alt, click around here, and then I can just clone over it. And, boom, it's gone. I'll put this in a group, call it cloning. Oh, not clonging. And at this point, I'm just going to sharpen. Now, I'm going to make a stamp, which is basically a layer that's all these other layers combined into the one layer. With the top layer selected, hit Control, Shift, Alt, E. There'll be a command on a Mac. And you can see we get this layer, and that's pretty much everything we've done merged into one layer. Now, I'm just going to hit Filter, Other, High Pass. And it gives us this gray, and you can see the little lines there, little outlines it's found. If I was printing, it'd probably be on like 0.7, 0.8. If I'm going to put it on Facebook, Facebook crushes images pretty hard with the compression algorithm. So I probably want to over sharpen a little bit. So I'm just going to put it on radius of 2. And then we need to flip the layer style to overlay. Now, if I zoom in a bit. Computer's laggy when I'm screen recording. Come on, you can do it. If I turn this on and off, I don't know if you can. How has that happened? I must have accidentally cloned. There we go. Control Z while the computer was lagging. Alright, so if I flip it on and off, I don't know if you can see on the video, but it pulls out a fair bit of detail. You can push it harder. You can go on hard light. It'll get you even more. You could flip it on linear light. It gets it even more, but I reckon it looks pretty crunchy. I'm just going to leave it on overlay. And that gets it pretty damn sharp. Now I'm just going to put this in a group. Call it sharpen. Alright, now I could straighten here in Photoshop, but I'm just going to leave it all and just do it in Lightroom because it only needs a minor straighten. I'm just going to file, save. It's saving down here. Taking its time. Okay, go back to Lightroom and, here it is. Now, with a minor straighten, the first thing I'd try would be auto and vertical, and if it didn't work, I'd go to the guided lines. So I'm going to hit auto, and that was actually terrible. And we'll hit vertical. You know what? I've never seen it do such a bad job. It usually actually hits it. We could also try and do it manually like this. And I'd probably hit constrain crop just to get rid of that. And, that's a straightened image. Now, I tilt it up a little bit to get a little bit more of the sky. And because I know when I'm going to do this, I'm going to go to 16 by 9 or 10 because I want a wider frame. And it basically gets me to around the rule of thirds. Hit enter, and like I said, I want a wider frame for these sort of shots. It's a wide shot, I don't think 4:3 sort of does it, or 2:3 does it, 3:2 does it justice. So yeah, I mean, it's all pretty much done. I rushed through this for the tutorial. When you do it, be more meticulous and take your time. And like I said, if you want to play around with the colors, you can. Uh, use the color select and sort of grab areas that you want, or you could just use selective color and then make global adjustments. Um, I kind of like the colors that are in this shot as it is. I don't think it really needs much color sort of corrections. But yeah, um, ooh, I can see this up here. That's where I'd probably just move the crop in just a little bit. And so yeah, there we go. So yeah, take your time. Don't rush as hard as I did. But yeah, if you have any questions, hit me up. And until next time, see you guys.